Steve, did you see the note that there's hold music on the phone line?
Yeah, and I normally don't set up the phone line unless one of our moderators needs to use it, but I'll go ahead and set it up now.
So Steve's setting up the phone line for those of you who want to ask a question verbally, over the phone later on in tonight's event. If we have time for that, you should go ahead and click on the small phone icon at the bottom of the left-hand column, and that way you can connect via phone. But you don't need to connect via phone unless you think you'll want to ask a question. Otherwise, you should be able to hear the audio just fine through your computer, and that should suffice, and you can use the chat space to ask questions.
Yeah, let me suggest that it may be a little hard to use the phone for the questions because there won't be any way to call on anyone since they all come through the same line. So I would suggest if you have a question, definitely put it in the chat or raise your hand when we get to that point in time. I'm not sure we're going to be able to pull you specifically out of the general phone line. Sorry about that.
Okay, Steve, I think we're ready to get going. So welcome, everybody. It's terrific to have you here. I'm Jenny Bradbury with PBS Teachers, and I am joined by Steve Hargadon of Classroom 2.0 as my co-moderator this evening. We have with us tonight a terrific group of educators who include experts from the for the Folger Shakespeare Library and a collection of teachers from across the country who have participated in teaching Shakespeare Institutes run by the Folger. And they're going to share with you some really terrific, innovative tools and strategies for remixing Shakespeare and invigorating your teaching of this wonderful writer for 21st century students. So before we get into the bulk of the presentations, I'm going to ask Steve to just give you all a quick orientation of Illuminate so that you're all familiar with the environment and know how to use the various tools that we'll be meeting tonight.
Thanks, Jenny. Welcome, everyone. Really fun to have you here. If you haven't used Illuminate before, we think you'll have a fun experience. There are a couple of features we want to make sure that you are aware of. You've probably noticed that you have a participants window and a chat window. Sometimes it's hard to follow all of the chat that flows by. So if you go up to View Layouts and select the wide layout, you'll often have a better experience with the chat. Now, speaking of the chat, we're really glad to have the chat. It's a great way to communicate, and especially to add information and links. We did notice that last month the chat was just so heavy it flew by fast and was distracting. So we are going to ask for a little bit of chat etiquette tonight. If you are tempted to put something in the chat that's not really pertaining to the session or might just confuse the speaker, we'll ask you to withhold from that temptation. And at least especially during when the speakers are presenting, if you could keep the chat to the actual topic, that would be very helpful. We're also going to try and call out the questions that you might have from the chat, so it's easier for us if we're not watching that screen zip by super fast. We do want to make sure that you're aware of the use of these emoticons, which are a lot of fun. They're at the bottom of your participant box, so if you click on the clapping hand, you'll see that's a way of indicating applause. There's a smiley face. You can also indicate confusion, or we know you will never need to do this, but you can use the disapproval or the thumbs down. When we're at a point actually where we are asking for questions and you want to raise your hand, there is a box with a hand and a green up arrow, and you can use that. If you look over in your chat box, you'll notice that down below where you would actually type in your chat, you can select next to the send, there is a selection box that allows you to send to this room, which is everybody, just to the moderators. Maybe you need to alert us to something that we might not be aware of. Or you can send to a selected participant who's in the session. Do be aware that those of us who are moderators, and those are all the people at the top of the participants box, can see every chat that you send, even if it's a private message to someone else. so we don't want you to to say anything that might embarrass you. Do know that even though it looks like you're sending a private chat, it is public to those of us who are moderators. Okay, this is a map of the world, and we're now going to give you permissions to use the tools to the left of this map. And if you want to click on that little wand with the red dot at the end, you can use it to indicate where you're located in the world. So go ahead and put yourself on the map. It's on Alaska, somewhere in Europe there. So Pam's asking, how do we do this? So you're looking at the map. To the left of the map is a little wand and with a red dot at the end, with a sparkly dot. And if you click on that and then click on the map, it will place you on the map. So it looks like a very North American-centric group tonight, although we appreciate those of you who are in Canada and looks like one in maybe London, we'll hope. So I'm going to, this is a map of the United States, so this is another way that you can indicate, and we can see where you're from, so you go ahead and click on that. Very fun. Well, we're sure glad to have all of you here. Please feel free to ask questions. I don't want to overdo that caution about the chat room, but while we're asking you to be careful not to over chat, the chat room does exist for a purpose, so we hope you'll use it. Okay, Jenny, back to you.
Great, thanks, Steve. A couple other things I wanted to point out quickly. We will have as you'll see here on the slide screen, there's an agenda for tonight's event. So we're doing a welcome right now. Then we have 6 terrific speakers, and in between their presentations, we're going to show you a couple of quick clips from the Great Performances version of King Lear that's airing later this month. At the end, we'll have a Q&A section. So during that Q&A section, we're going to ask you to submit questions in the chat space. So during that time, it's especially important that people try to refrain from any side chat and just use that space to ask questions. We may also have time to have people submit their questions orally, and if you want to do that, you should let us know in the chat space, and we'll give you a microphone, and then in order to activate your microphone, you'll need to click on the microphone icon that's at the bottom of the left column. We're also going to be doing a couple of polls over the course of tonight's event. So if you look up at the top navigation, you'll see all of the icons. And if you look at the 7th icon over, you'll see a green check, and the 8th one over, you'll see a red X. To vote in a poll, you'll just need to click on one of those, and you'll see I just clicked on the green check, and that's why there's a green check showing up next to my name in the participant window. So to uncheck it, you just click it again. Some of the questions we're going to be asking are yes, no, so we'll be using the check and the X. Other ones will be multiple choice, and in that case, exactly, someone has just changed it to ABC. So we'll be using those as well. So we'll give you a prompt when that happens, but just so you know. The other quick note I wanted to make to everybody is that when we do show the video clips, they're going to pop up in a window and automatically start playing. You can adjust the volume on your own screen by using the little volume slide scale that is in the YouTube interface. But I strongly encourage you not to do anything to pause or stop the video, because we're going to stop and kind of move on with the event after the video has stopped playing once, and so you'll miss the chance to see the whole video if you play around with the stopping and pausing buttons. All of the sites and all of the videos that we show you tonight, we're going to put the URLs into the chat window, and those will be part of the transcript. So if for some reason you have any kind of difficulty with volume or seeing an entire clip, rest assured that you'll have lots of information to take away with you about how to go and revisit these clips later on in the event. Or sorry, later on after the event. Okay, so our first speaker tonight is Bob Young, who's the Director of Education at the Folger Shakespeare Library, and he's going to give you a little bit of an overview of what Folger offers to educators, and then we'll show you a couple of very popular places on the Folger site where you can find some terrific teaching resources. So Bob, please take it away.
Thanks, Jenny. Welcome to everybody. Great to see you all here tonight. I'm going to be very brief. I just wanted to let everyone know about the terrific education resources that Folger Shakespeare Library provides free for teachers at our website. Jenny, if we could perhaps go to the education lesson plan slide at this point, just so people could see. This is the most popular of the website pages that Folger Education has to offer, visited by we get over 1 million hits to our web pages every year. And Jenny, I don't see that slide coming up. Great, thank you. Anyway, when you get there, you'll see every month we feature 2 lesson plans. We've featured lesson plans on King Lear for February, March, and April, and we'll go back to featuring lesson plans from other plays as well. The lesson plans, after they're up for the month, go into our archive, and you can get to those very easily. They're all performance-based in origin. We just finished editing through the lesson plans that have been up for a long time, and we are looking for lesson plans that feature performance-based teaching, and essentially we define that as an interactive approach. If we can go to that slide next, Jenny, if possible. Performance-based teaching and interactive close reading of text through intellectual, physical, and vocal engagement. We think that it's very important for students to get up on their feet, speak the language that Shakespeare wrote, and have a lot of fun with it. And our website gives you a definition of that coming up on the screen right there for you to take a look at. If you're in New Jersey, you'll note that we have a Shakespeareans, part of a Dodge grant program that we have coming up in May, grades 5 through 12, and also at the Shakespeare Theater of New Jersey at Drew University. So you can get more information about those by visiting our website. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about before we go on is a new feature that we have, and that's our play-by-play. And you can go to that page on our website and click on the title of one of the plays you're interested in, and you'll be able to access all of the information, all of the resources, podcasts that we've been doing on Macbeth, on 1 Henry IV, just by clicking through on that one page. And if we could take a look at that page, Jenny, so that people could see it, that would be great. It's coming up on your screen. There you go. So you'll see, for example, if you clicked on the King Lear, you'd be taken to everything that we have for King Lear, and you can just click your way through and get everything right there at your fingertips. It's a terrific resource. It's all free, all available to teachers, and people are using it around the country, around the world. We're very excited about it, and if you've not visited it before, I strongly encourage you to check us out. And Jenny, I think that's it for me.
Okay, thanks, Bob. I see some folks are saying that they're having trouble seeing the slides that are in the web tour. Hopefully, most folks are able to see that. As I said, we'll put the URLs into the chat window so that folks can get all of the links so that they can check it out later. And I apologize for any sort of technical problems. We haven't had this happen before, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on. But we'll hope that that things go a little bit more smoothly. Someone said click refresh, and that worked for them. So you might try that as well. So here's the first of our polls. This first question is a multiple choice question. So again, you'll want to use the A, B, or C button at the top of your screen. And the question is, if you use technology when you teach Shakespeare, do you use it mostly A, in your classroom, B, in your school's computer lab or media center, or C, other? So if you could go ahead and vote now, that would be great. Okay, and I'm going to publish these results. So Bob, it looks like most folks are saying that they use it in the classroom. Some people saying in the computer center, some people saying other, and some saying none of the above. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Jenny, first, I think it's terrific that people are using technology when they're teaching Shakespeare. And again, it probably shows that many teachers have access to computers, technology in their classrooms, which is good. It'd be interesting to know why people are not using the school's media center or computer lab. Maybe that's more restrictive in their use. And I see about 18 folks are using some other means of technology. So be interesting, maybe when we get to the Q&A we can talk a little bit more about that.
Great, good suggestion. Okay, so then the next question here, I'm just going to switch over to the yes-no version. And if folks can use the green check or the red X in the top and let us know, have you used podcasts and video clips available from the Folger website before? Okay, so here are the results of this poll, and it looks like the majority of folks are saying no. So Bob, what are your comments on that?
Well, I'm a little disappointed, but not too surprised, since it's a relatively new feature that we have on the website using YouTube and video podcasts on our Folger website. It's something we started just about a year ago, a little over a year ago. So we have to do a better job of getting folks, making folks aware. We've been using our magnet mail, which goes out to about 7,500 teachers every month. Folks in the room tonight, if you're not getting our newsletter, you can sign up for it at our website and take a look at what we have to offer. It's terrific stuff.
Great, I definitely second that. Thanks so much, Bob. Okay, so before we move on to our next speaker, I am going to show you all a clip from the Great Performances version of King Lear, which stars Ian McKellen and is going to be airing later this month. So please check your local PBS station schedule to find out when that airs. It's a production by the Royal Shakespeare Company that is filmed from a stage production. So here's our first clip, and once again, you can adjust the volume on your own computer, but please refrain from pressing pause or stop. So obviously that's a very short clip, but those of you familiar with the play will recognize it as Act 1, Scene 1, in which Lear poses the question that will be the exciting force for so much of what follows when he is deciding to divide his kingdom and sets up this dynamic between his daughters trying to each get their share. We'll show you another clip later on in the evening from later on in the play, but now without further ado I'd like to turn it over to Mike LaMonaco, who's a senior consultant on national education for the Folger Shakespeare Library, and he's going to share with you some terrific Web 2.0 tools and some really fun and innovative ideas for teaching Shakespeare. So Mike, please take it away. Mike, we can't hear you, so you might need to turn on your mic. Turn on your mic.
I thought like I'm trying to hold.
So Mike, you just click it once and it stays down. You don't have to hold it down. So if Mike is clicking on it and it's going off, well, Mike, it looks like it's on. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, is that all right? Can you hear me now? Yes? Okay, good. I'm sorry. It kept clicking off. So I lost some time, but we'll catch it up. So Web 2.0 basically is when students create content and post it onto the web. So students become content creators instead of just watching YouTube videos and just sort of being passive. And what we're going to do is take a look at two simple activities that students can do. The first one is using hypertext. Hypertext, all you need for hypertext is Microsoft Word or any kind of a word processor, and by highlighting a word and right-clicking it, you can then link it to some other word, some other image, some other video. So what we're going to do is take a look at the first one. So Jenny, if you can switch that. Great. So this is a passage from King Lear, and you'll see what we're going to do is we're going to take this, mouse, and we're just going to point it to a couple of words here. So if we were to point to, for instance, the phrase gilded butterflies, we click on that, and we have a picture of gilded butterflies. If we were to a picture, we go down to this line. This is from the end of the play where Lear is talking to his daughter about what's going to happen when they go to prison. And he says, we'll talk of court news, we'll talk about with them who loses, who wins. And you can click on who loses, and we see somebody that we might remember. And guess who's on who wins? There he is. And you can click on, oops, he's back. You can click on other phrases. So we have God's spies, we have God's, that is computer. You can also click onto video. Oops. So if you click onto video, the word ebb and flow, we'll see. Okay, and we could stop that. This is really simple to do. It's very easy for students to do it. And what students tell me is when they do this, it really forces them to look closely at the words, to think about the text, and then explore some of the meanings of the words. As I said, it's pretty easy to do. The students love doing it. They find it very addictive because once you get started with this, you just want to link to every single word. So there are audios, there are videos, there are images, etc. Okay, we're going to take a look at the next exercise now. And this is using a web program called Photo Story 3, which is a free Microsoft program. If you have iMovie, it works just as well. And what we do here is we take some images from still images. And what I did is I found a series of still images from this production of King Lear on the web. I loaded them up into Photo Story. I added some music, and it sort of did the rest. So we're going to take a look at this. And I also took some of the sound from the video.
Know that we have divided in three our kingdom. That is our first.
All right, we can probably stop it there. Great. People are asking questions about how you grade this, and certainly that's always a tricky question. We can talk about that at some other point afterward. But the idea is that the students are creating stuff. What I also had to do with that, and somebody wrote on the comments that we used Audacity. So I used Audacity to remove a giant chunk of the dialogue because I didn't want to use the entire thing. I wanted to get the beginning and the end. And you sort of heard that scene before. So those are really simple ideas that you can use, and we're going to talk about a lot more in a few minutes. So now I think we're moving over to Mary Ellen. Is that right? Yes.
That's right. Great. Thank you so much, Mike. And so everybody knows, Mike is our guest blogger this month on PBS Teachers Media Infusion blog, and he shares a whole series of great tools, including information about the two ideas that he just showed you tonight. So we'll give you that link later on in the evening. I definitely recommend that you visit that the blog after this event to follow up on some of these ideas in more detail. And there, Mike has created a little tutorial on how to create your own hypertext. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mary Ellen Dakin, who's a National Board Certified Teacher of English. She's from Revere, Massachusetts, from Revere High School, and she is going to show us readingshakespeare.org and share with you some ideas about creating storyboards and audio tableaus with students. So Mary Ellen, welcome.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm very happy to be here. I'm actually going to begin by talking about a project that my students are working on right now. It's actually a work in progress. There we go. It's a project I've developed in the past few weeks that asks students to do three things. It asks them to demonstrate what they're learning about reading Shakespeare. It asks them to demonstrate what they're learning about reading Shakespeare on film. And it asks them to demonstrate what they're learning about reading Shakespeare onto film. Even in the 21st century, teaching Shakespeare always begins with the words. About a year ago, as part of a quest to incorporate more student-led reading and student-led discussion into the Shakespeare elective that I teach at Revere High School, I looked closely at the book club model that was developed in the 1990s by a Chicago teacher named Harvey Daniels. It's called Literature Circles, and a lot of teachers are probably very familiar with it. Essentially, students meet in small groups. Each student specializes in one active reading role. The first four roles are basic roles. All good readers question the text. All good readers make connections between the text and their lives or their world. All good readers of literature really note the aesthetic qualities of language, and as far as illustrator goes, all good readers see the words. The roles beneath that are optional, but they're fun. I've worked for the past year again with a team of teachers at my school to modify Harvey Daniels' lit circle roles to accommodate the complexity of reading Shakespeare. Film has three faces: a literary face, a dramatic face, and a cinematic face. During our reading of King Lear, I used clips from the PBS production to have students practice seeing and hearing the three faces of film by working in three viewing teams. For example, all the kids in the literary team would sit together, the kids in the dramatic team would sit together, the cinematic team would sit together. We'd all watch the same clip. In their teams, they would take notes on what they saw and heard. They'd talk to each other, and then I would jigsaw the groups so that the teams were mixed and the students could teach each other. In this image from the opening scene of the film, the students in my literary team noticed almost immediately the symbolism of Lear's crown. He takes it from his head and he holds it in front of him like a zero, and he tells Burgundy that Cordelia's dowry will be nothing, I have sworn. And my students know, thanks to Mike's book, Shakespeare's Book of Lists, that nothing is a word that's repeated 34 times in this play, so it's a very important idea. When we got to the end of Act 2, I had students design before and after costumes for the characters in the first two acts of the play that undergo a radical change. Obviously King Lear, but also Kent and Edgar, and some of my students wanted to look at before and after costumes for Goneril and Regan, so I let them do that. The students in my class who worked on Lear's costume extracted from the language that as Lear becomes more powerful, he becomes more humble. But when they were doing their after costume that shows Lear change, they wanted him to keep his crown and his royal robes. They wanted these things to become dirty and torn, and they added a cane to his costume to show how he deteriorates. When they viewed this clip, the students in the dramatic team loved the way the costume and the makeup here interpret Lear's deterioration. One student said he looks older and younger all at once, so you get that sense of a second childhood. They love that instead of a crown, he's wearing a wreath of flowers, and instead of, tottering on a cane, which is what they imagine, he's holding the full staff. One student actually said the fool's puppet looks like the king now, and the king looks like the puppet. And as soon as she said that, the whole room realized that we were talking about irony. But we were talking about irony conveyed through the costume, so that was very exciting. The cinematic elements of film. This is the face of film that my students are least familiar with. It's also the face of film, and I hate to admit this, that I am least familiar with this. We're currently using John Golden's Glossary of Film Terms, which comes from his book, Reading in the Dark, to learn about things like long shots, medium shots, close-ups, low angle, high angle, eye level, Dutch angle. There are about 30 terms on the list. We're learning not only to identify them as we see them, but to wonder about their purpose and their effect. The lighting in the film clips that we have seen in this production of Lear is generally low-key, very dark and shadowy, and that seems to add to the tension and the sense of suspicion in the play. In most of the scenes, my students noticed that the actors' faces are almost always lit from the side, which makes them look like they have split personalities. Half of their face is in light and the other half in shadow. So they really notice a shot like this one, and I think this beautiful shot is also part of Mike's photo story. They noticed it's rare in this production when an actor's face is lit with front light and lit from above. But still, you can see shadows, the aftermath of shadows on Lear's face. So this is something we're all learning about. In order to bring what students know about reading King Lear with what they know about reading King Lear on film, I felt like it was time for them to read King Lear onto film. Now, I've had students perform Shakespeare, I've had them film their performances, photograph their performances, so many times in the past I can't count, but I have never really worked with my students on the cinematic tools of storytelling, and that's what we're doing now. Once the storm breaks in Act 3 of this play, there are many speeches. My students located 7 in the first 4 scenes of Act 3 alone that seem to rage against the limitations of the page and the limitations of the stage, and that beg to be filmed with the words as voiceover narration for the events that are being described. The details of this slide probably won't show up much, and probably many of you who are viewing, and I just lost, there it is. Nope, wrong one. There we go. Okay. What you're looking at are 2 different storyboards of the same speech. Very quickly, for those of you who don't know, and you probably all do know, storyboards are pre-production sketches of scenes that help the director, camera operators, set designers to visualize key scenes. They save time and money. Borrowing again from John Golden's book, my students chose a speech and then worked on the first storyboard, the model of which is in Golden's book. It's the one on the left. That first storyboard on the left focuses students on the literary and dramatic reading of their speech, although you can't read it here. They sketch shots and then they respond to 2 questions for each shot. The first question, what did you want to demonstrate in this shot? And then the second question, what lines in the speech helped you to see this? We did that work, the work on the left, on February 24th. I didn't distribute the second storyboard activity until March 5th. In between those 2 days, we worked on something I've already spoken about, viewing teams, viewing clips in teams that are literary teams, dramatic teams, cinematic teams, and using the film clips from the Royal Shakespeare's King Lear. Then, on March 5th, I distributed the second storybook activity, the one on the right, the storyboard activity, excuse me. This definitely requires them to think like film directors. They need to make decisions about, and again, I'm sorry that you can't read it, but they need to make decisions about, in that first shot, what is the camera shot? What is the camera angle? Is there any camera movement? What editing and sound and lighting do you want to use for that shot? I'm showing the work of a student named Shauna Leclaire. In her first shot, on the right, she technically has 3 things going on. I mean, technically that's 3 shots, but she wanted to take those lines from the Fool's Prophecy, when fools are more in word than matter, when brewers mar their malt with water, when nobles are their tailors' tutors. What she decided that she wanted to do was to pile those images of, she describes them as chaos and despair, using a film technique called cross-cutting. Each image uses a different camera angle and different lighting, but the parallel editing connects and intensifies the impact of those 3 things that are happening in that frame of her film. So, I mean, I was really pleased. She wasn't the only one, but I was quite pleased to see a growing sophistication as they take to literature the lens of a camera. Finally, this is where we are right now, and this is what I meant by a work in progress. What my students are doing now is they're working on something I'm calling an audio tableau, which is probably a hybrid of different things that I've had them do in the past. They already formed teams. Once they got into their teams, they chose what they thought was the strongest storyboard, or they combined some of the best ideas into one new storyboard, the more sophisticated storyboard. They rehearsed their tableaus on Monday. They performed and photographed each of their frames for the tableau. Today I handed out the cue sheet. They were uploading their photographs onto the Macs, and they were planning, coming up with ideas for voiceover and soundtrack. We were using GarageBand. One of my students can play the piano, and I actually think he's going to try to create his own music for their audio tableau, which I was very excited about. On Friday, or by Friday, we will be recording the voiceovers, and we'll be adding sound effect and music. And by next week, hopefully, these projects will be put together and they'll be published at our school website. And that is my story of the work in progress that I'm calling the audio tableau. So I'm going to hand it back to Jenny now. Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks so much. That was really terrific. And I see lots of folks in the chat saying, these are great ideas, very exciting. So that was a great overview of what you're doing with your kids. They sound very lucky to have you as a teacher. So now we're going to do another quick poll, and I'm going to just change us to the ABC version here. So the question is, how do you use video when you teach Shakespeare? A, before teaching the play, B, while teaching the play, C, after teaching the play. And I guess if the answer is all of the above, then you could refrain from answering. So please go ahead and choose the answer that is most appropriate for you using the buttons at the top of your screen, A, B, or C. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and publish our results here. So Mike, it looks like most folks are using it during teaching the play. What are your thoughts on that?
We like that a lot. The idea that people are actually integrating it with their teaching as opposed to separating it and doing it after the fact as a sort of a reward for plotting through the play tells us a lot, and that's really good news.
Great. Okay, and the second question is, do you use YouTube clips of different productions when teaching Shakespeare? So please use the green check if you do and the red X if you don't. And this question is actually specifically about YouTube. So I saw some folks earlier in the chat saying that their schools block YouTube, but go ahead and answer the question to the best that you can. Obviously, if your school blocks it, then your answer would be no. Unless you're tricky, like some of the people in the chat suggested, and you tape stuff at home and bring it in and use it that way. Okay, so here are our results. Your thoughts, Mike?
Well, again, I think a lot of people, 64%, no, 36% say no. And I think one of the things that people need to realize or figure out is that there's such an incredible wealth of information on there. You just saw some examples of it tonight. You're going to see some more in a little bit. And as we've pointed out, there is some really simple ways. Using Real Audio, Real Player, automatically lets you save it to a flash drive and bring it into class. So there are other ways around it, and it really makes a big difference. And again, since so many people are using it during the teaching of a play, there's so many different variations. You can show the same scene in 3 or 4 different ways. So I think that'll change.
Great. Well, I hope so. So our next speaker is Amy Yulin. She's an English teacher from Tumwater, Washington. She teaches at Tumwater High School, and she's the creator of ShakespeareHigh.com, which I'm going to pull up now. She's going to be telling us about the language of the fool and show us an example of using Wordle. So Amy, welcome.
Thank you. I will just get started right away as we wait for Shakespeare High to come up. Let you know that during my senior Shakespeare elective this year, I noticed that my students were confused by the fool's language, and they felt that it was nonsense, and so they simply glossed over his lines, and I knew that I needed a way to help them unlock the fool's language, so I developed the lesson that you're about to see. Okay, and just for those of you who haven't been to Shakespeare High, just note that we have a great cafeteria that you can bring your students to, and they can ask questions and get some feedback, and the students area is also very good for them as well. All right. Okay, so as my Shakespeare class is over, I enlisted the aid of my freshman English class to test out this lesson. And this is a really small overflow class of 12 amazing students and one fabulous TA. Aren't they cute? Since our next unit is Romeo and Juliet, I decided that this King Lear experiment would be a great introduction to Shakespeare's language for them, since this is their first encounter with Shakespeare. So on day 1, we did an on-your-feet introduction to Shakespeare's language using lines from a variety of plays, and they ended the day creating 6-person scenes using only the lines from their cards. And during our debrief that day, they told me that the language wasn't as difficult as they thought it would be, and that it will make even more sense with practice. So from day 1, they had great insights, were enthusiastic, and had a playful attitude toward unlocking Shakespeare's language. For day 2, I went to Open Source Shakespeare, so if we can see that.
Sorry, it's going to take me a sec too.
Okay. Well, I will go back a slide then so everybody can look at my cute kids. Here we go. Okay, fantastic. So this is opensourceshakespeare.org, and you can see the link to the left. And what you'll notice, oh, do you have control of this, Jenny, or do I? I guess I do, and I clicked on the wrong link, sorry. Okay, so with Open Source Shakespeare, I made a copy of the Fool's lines, and to do this, I just scrolled down. Oh my. Okay, this is not giving me a lot of control here. Okay, so if you see on the left-hand side here that you can scroll down to individual plays, so I'm clicking on King Lear, and I then was able to scroll down to the Fool's lines and clicked on Fool. Okay, and so then it accesses all 58 of the Fool's speeches, and then notice that one is able to print the lines only or with the cue lines, which is very helpful if you're having students act out scenes in class to give them their lines with the cues. I went to show the full lines and then printed the Act 1 lines, which we were looking at for this activity. Okay, thanks, Jenny. I'm done with that. So after reading Act 1 of the Fool's lines, I had the kids highlight unfamiliar words, and we created a game taking turns looking up the words using the Shakespeare glossary, the OED, and computers. So as you might imagine, the kids on the computers tended to find their words first, but not all of the words could be found on the computers. And after this activity, our debrief, the kids had the following insightful words to say. The young man pictured at the top had great insight into the character when he said that he's not as big a fool as people think he is. And this led to the question of why the character is called a fool if he is really wise. And that's the essential question that we're carrying throughout the remainder of the unit. Okay, so the window just got really big, and I don't have controls now to send it along to the next slide.
Sorry, I was having problems getting it. Is it back? Okay, good.
It is, yes. Thank you. Okay, so here we go. So on day 3, we started rehearsing scenes from Act 1, Scene 4 and Act 1, Scene 5 using the new Folger Shakespeare Library edition of King Lear. And these editions are excellent texts for students because they have textual notes on the facing pages that the kids find really helpful. And as you can see in these photos, I'm fortunate to have access to our Performing Arts Center for class activities and rehearsals. And so during our debrief this day, I asked how the fool should act, and again, the students responded that he should be goofy and funny, but also wise. And so the next day, we determined what the fool would look like, and the kids drew their costume designs and presented it to the rest of the class. And they had to determine the gender and age of the character and cast the role with a famous actor. So we had both male and female fools that ranged in age from 10 to 50. And most said that the fool should be anywhere between 25 and 35 because it's young enough to be silly, yet old enough to be wise. We then watched Act 1 of the PBS Great Performances King Lear, and the kids were struck by the age of the fool and how much older he is than what most of them had thought. So our next step was our rehearsal process, and we constantly came back to the question, how is our performance informed by viewing the professional actors? And we also come back to the question, what does this teach us about the fool? And finally, this leads me to our final writing assignment. And we use Wordle to analyze the fool's lines. And Wordle creates word bubbles that give prominence to the more frequently used words. And again, we copy and paste the text from open source Shakespeare into Word. The kids then use find and replace to take out words like thou, thy, thee, and thine, since those are used most frequently. And then they copy the text into Wordle and create their word bubbles. And these bubbles are used to help analyze the language. What does this tell us about the fool's lines in relationship to the lines they're performing from their scenes from Act 1? And so our final discussion for the act asks the kids why the fool is allowed to get away with calling the king a fool, but both Kent and Cordelia get banished for their honesty. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Those are really terrific ideas. And again, I see a lot of enthusiasm reflected in the chat space. So that's terrific. Hopefully folks will check out all of these ideas in further depth after the event is over. So I'm going to pull up now another clip from the Great Performances production of King Lear. This one is from Act 3, Scene 2, when Lear is on the heath outside of Gloucester's castle. He's just been rebuffed by his 2 elder daughters and is in quite a fury. And the reason that I wanted to show this clip is that I think it does a nice job of showing that even though this is a filmed stage production, you get quite a dramatic sense of the action. So here it is. Okay, so there you have it. Next up, we have Josh Cabot, an English and film teacher from Roslyn High School in New York. And Josh is going to show us a couple YouTube clips that his students created. One a trailer for King Lear and the other a yak track. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, Josh will explain it. No worries. So welcome, Josh.
Buddy, Josh Cabot from New York, and as Jenny said, I am an English teacher who sort of lapsed into film, and I'm always looking for interesting ways to combine the two. And I think, what we've been looking at over the last 5 years is really just a fundamental paradigm shift in the way film is used in the classroom. As Michael Monaco was hinting before, it used to be a very passive experience. You sit through the play and you're rewarded by watching the film at the end while the teacher marks their papers for a couple of days. And lately, as apropos of what Marianne was doing, It's become more comparative video and getting the kids into the scenes. But now, to use the words of Karl Marx, now that the means of production are so much in the hands of the workers, I think it's time to really examine the ways in which we can make video in the classroom with Shakespeare a very active experience, because making videos is now amazingly inexpensive and almost completely idiot-proof. And so, as Jenny pointed out, I want to show you a couple of activities that force the students to do what we really want them to do, which is to comb through the text and analyze. And the first is based on a format that they know intimately well, which is the movie trailer or preview, because we all have to sit through 5 or 6 of them before we get to see the movie we're waiting for in the theaters. And so I begin this activity by showing them some examples, what you can get from Turner Classic Movies. There are tons of examples, and I prefer showing the older ones, from the 40s and 50s, because they're very florid and overblown, drama, action, suspense, romance. And we talk about the elements that are involved in a movie trailer, and it essentially boils down to clips of scenes, credits, and titles, and those various elements. And so just to, I know you're thinking, well, what if I don't have the technology for this? So for that reason, I wanted to show you what I did with my students when I was teaching in the New York City schools a few years ago. That is as low-tech as you could possibly imagine. Handheld credit cards and the all-time greatest tagline to sell King Lear. So Jenny, if you roll the trailer, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, you have to admit that's the all-time greatest tagline. Bring the kids, all of them. That was totally theirs. And you see that, you can surely do this on fancy editing programs or something as simple as iMovie or Movie Maker. But we just did that. We taped it and we edited it by going from tape to tape. So it's a very easy thing to do. All right, now getting a little technically more complex. I'm sure you've all had the experience when you buy a DVD you see the audio menu, and you have the option of an audio track. You can hear the film sound as it's recorded, or often you can hear an audio commentary, wherein usually a participant in the making of the film, possibly the director or an actor, or perhaps even a critic, if it's Criterion, will expound on the film, and you can listen to that as you watch the film go by. Well, again, the technology has become so simple to do that another activity that I do, another name for the audio commentary is a yak track. And so what I do is using a simple ripping program like Handbrake, and for those of you who don't know the technology, ripping just means to copy a scene from a disk onto a file, and then you can manipulate it. So we rip a scene, and then we load it up onto something as simple as iMovie, and then eliminate the audio track, and then the students will sit down and share their observations and record them as the scene goes by. Now, you can do that in a number of different ways. You can do it in GarageBand. You can actually do it in iMovie, I just found out. But again, it makes the students consider the choices that the director is making, which is the essence of watching, using video at all in the class. And this is a much more sort of active way of doing it. So, Jenny, if you could run the yak track, it's myself and a student of mine, and you can do it with a student or have students do it by themselves. It's a really fun activity, so check it out. There you go. And it's phenomenally easy to do, and there's so much more you can do. I mean, another thing, some of my more creative film students who are really good with this stuff, they will rip a scene using a program like Handbrake, and then actually re-edit it. In other words, load it up and cut it back and forth, make changes in the scene. And that's a little advanced, but however you use it, I think it's time to acknowledge that the role of passive video in the Shakespeare classroom is going to diminish, and as these things get easier and easier to use and more common to use, and the technology, as you saw, was not that far advanced, so don't be scared by it, that this is a whole new paradigm in using video in the classroom. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Josh. I see that there are a lot of questions about the technical stuff, and we're running a little bit behind schedule. So I think we're going to go ahead and have Chris go, and then I'm going to give you all a little bit of an overview of what else is on deck from PBS teachers, and then we'll turn it over to the Q&A, and I'm hoping that all of our guests will stick around to answer some questions about people's technical questions and other questions and comments about Lear and Shakespeare in general. So next up, last but certainly not least, we have Chris Schamberg, who's Associate Professor in the Graduate Program in Educational Technology at New Jersey City University. And Chris is going to share with us some great ideas about remixing audio and creating Foley audio. So welcome, Chris.
Thanks for having me here. Let me go on to the first slide. What this project's about is about creating an audio play from a scene from a play. We've done it with Macbeth and with Julius Caesar, and I have some links at the end of the presentation. What it does is it gets the kids to really read closely and apply a lot of the performance-based techniques, as well as consider sort of the unique aspects of audio. What they do is they're going to enact a dialogue in a credible way, add sound effects, which can be pretty fun because we use some techniques of Foley, and add music. We chose a scene for this demonstration, The Blinding of Gloucester from Act 3, Scene 7. The first thing the kids did was edit the scene. They cut lines here, they cut part of Gloucester's long speech, and then they put actions, movements, and sounds. And again, I gave them a demonstration of what an audio play was, so they sort of knew what to capitalize on, what they had to do, like walking, doors opening, eye gouging. Here's the first part of the scene. Here's where they first bring Gloucester in. You can see some of the sound effects on the side where they have noise, some chairs or ropes moving around. We'll hear in a second, but one other thing, we used Audacity for all this, and I saw a lot of comments on the side about people who use Audacity. If you could use a tape recorder and a word processing program, you could have Audacity pretty much learned in 20 minutes, and kids pick it up pretty quickly. Again, on the before I show the clip of this, I have 3 little audio clips. There's a full tutorial at the Folger website that show you how to use Audacity and do a scene from Macbeth. So, Jenny, I'll turn my mic off if you could cue the first clip. Okay, so here's how we did the sound. We rehearsed the dialogue a few times, and then the slamming door was a filing cabinet with some added effect, and then the binding of Gloucester was a chain right there. One reason why I got this idea was from it's a movie about a radio show, and then the kid goes to see the superhero, and it's some unassuming man, and the world is just a bunch of household items there. So it's really good to have stimulate kids' imaginations, and also think about different mediums and what to capitalize on and what their limitations are. Let me go to 2 more scenes right now. The next one is you can read this here. This is when Regan plucks Gloucester's beard. So, Jennifer, if you could just cue that scene, I'll turn my mic off. Yeah, I just heard someone comment Radio Davis. That was the movie I was thinking of. And let me just go to one. This is the final scene, the final part of the scene, rather. And here we bring all of it in. Of course, it was fun trying to experiment with a good sound effect for eye gouging. One of the lines is out vile jelly, and squeezing Jello in different ways worked. If you look at the top right, there's a little sword fight there that you're going to hear in a second, and that's the sound effect. The kids were banging some forks and spoons together. And then Regan gives a cheap shot and kills the servant from back, and we needed a sound effect for that, so kids experimented with different fruit and utensils, and stabbing an apple with a fork seemed to be the best. And again, the old go thrust him out of gates of Dover and let him smell. Go thrust him out of gates and let him smells with a Dover was the filing cabinet again. Oh, both of his eyes are gouged, so you'll hear that jelly squeezing twice. Okay, I'll turn my mic off if you can cue that up, Jennifer. Okay, and here are just some links that can help you out. If you go to the website, I put 2 examples of student work where they do this Foley work with scenes from Shakespeare. They're both here at the bottom. The sound effects came from the Free Sound project, and you can there's some links there. And the music I got from Creative Commons, the CC Mixter, and they have sort of a sliding scale of copyright. So it was static by Coolamoo, and the part of the license was to give attribution, and then I could use it pretty much however I want. I'll just pass it on and turn my mic off.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Those are some terrific ideas. And again, lots of enthusiasm on the part of our participants. I noticed someone asked a question about having access to the slides. Since this is a good example of a slide you might want to revisit. You'll notice on the top bar above the participants window, there is a save icon. If you click on that, it'll give you the option of saving the slideshow and or the chat to your desktop, and you can choose the file type you want. So that's another option if you want to access this stuff after the actual event. You can save the slide deck and the chat right to your own desktop. So here we are for our last poll of the evening. The first question is, when teaching Shakespeare, do your students create and post web content? So please give us a green check for yes and a red X for no. Okay, so Mike, what are your thoughts on these results?
I think this is going to change a lot after tonight. I think a lot of people are probably, from what we've been reading in the chat, kind of excited about some of these ideas. And I think we'll see more and more of this as we go on. I think teachers are starting to realize that while there are some things that block access to the web and some hindrances in the classroom, ultimately it's worth it because it really does get to the text in some interesting ways.
Great. And our last question, at the conclusion of a Shakespeare unit, do your students perform scenes from the play? Again, give us a red X for no and a green check for yes, please. Okay, so here we seem to have a lot more yeses. Bob, your thoughts?
I think it's terrific because, you know, at Folger we really do promote performance-based teaching, and to see a lot of folks who are doing that in their classrooms is wonderful. And I'm not sure about the none. If you're not trying it, it's great to give it a go, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by the outcome.
Great, thanks. Okay, so now I'm going to actually take folks, just show you a few other things just to recap. And first I want to take you and show you the Great Performances site. As I mentioned earlier, this site offers a whole bunch of links from the Folger Shakespeare Library, some really great lessons that you can use with your students, and it also will offer great video and other general resources from Great Performances. So I highly recommend visiting that after this event. I am going to see if I can pull this up. It seems to be behaving a little oddly. I guess I'll have to do it this way, so let's see. Okay, so this is a Great Performances site. If you scroll down using the scroll bar on your own computer, you will see that there's information here about tonight's webinar. There's also general information about the Folger Shakespeare Library, and then there are a whole collection of resources from the Folger's collection specifically designed to help you teach Lear. So I hope you will visit this site after the event. I just put the URL in the chat window and check out some of these great resources from the Folger. On the screen now you should see the URL for the Folger site, which Bob gave us a brief tour of earlier. It's www.folger.edu, and there's a lot of great content there for teachers. There's a teaching resources link that will help you find a lot of that, so we recommend visiting that site. As I mentioned earlier, Mike LaMonaco is our blogger this month on Media Infusion. I would strongly encourage you to read the blog and post comments. It's a great way for you to continue to have conversation with Mike after tonight's event, and he goes over a lot of the ideas presented here and some additional ones, so please visit the blog and contribute to the conversation there. We have 3 more exciting webinars coming up in the series. Next month, we're going to have some math experts sharing some new resources from CyberChase related to Earth Day. So if you are or know elementary math educators, we highly recommend that they visit and learn about some very cool digital tools for teaching elementary math. In May, we're going to have Jean-Michel Cousteau, who is barely back on dry land, sharing with us some great digital content for teaching marine science. And in June, we're going to have Bob Sprankle, Cheryl Oakes, and Alice Barr, 3 technology integration specialists from Maine, sharing some ideas with you about how you can use the summer to set up a personal learning network and what you'll learn by online collaboration. So we hope you'll join us for those events. All of this info is posted on our website as well. Our main URL is pbsteachers.org. In addition to offering webinars, and we also have thousands of free standards-based lesson plans, activities, video clips, all organized by grade and subject for teachers in pre-K through grade 12. So please visit us and take advantage of these terrific free resources. We have a new series of activity packs, which are widgets that you can grab and embed on your own website if you like them. And featured on this slide is our Shakespeare and the Renaissance activity pack, which has PBS resources and activity ideas for students in grades 3 through 12. So I highly recommend that you check out the activity packs, and please grab them and share them as you see fit. We also have a community on our site called PBS Teachers Connect. We've already set up a discussion there for folks who want to continue the conversation from tonight. So we highly recommend that you come and become a member of the Connect community. I saw someone in the chat space earlier saying, you know, please come and visit us and share some of these ideas, because we've had some terrific ideas presented by people who are not on our presentation panel tonight, and it would be terrific to continue the conversation among you in PBS Teachers Connect. So please visit us there. It's very easily accessed from the main PBS Teachers site. Of course, we also encourage you to join Steve Hargadon's online community, which is Classroom 2.0, and is a social network for practical applications of Web 2.0 and collaborative technologies in learning. Obviously, a lot of the ideas that were shared tonight would be ripe for further conversation on Classroom 2.0 as well. And we want to thank Illuminate very much for being the host of this event. We definitely appreciate all the support that they give us. And I whipped through that, so now it looks like we have 5 minutes or maybe 4 minutes for Q&A, and then Steve will pull up a survey. We would really appreciate if before you leave tonight you would take time to fill out this quick survey, because we're always looking for feedback on how people enjoyed the event and what we can do to improve these events in the future. So thanks very much for being here, and please, if you have questions, put them in the chat space now. You couldn't ask for a better collection of Shakespeare experts to toss ideas to. So I hope that you will put some questions in the chat space right now. And if you want to use your mic to ask a question, then let us know that in the chat space as well. Thanks.
Jenny, do you want to start with a couple of the questions that we gathered as we went along?
Sure, great idea.
So one that got kind of answered at the time, but was a question as to how the hyperlink text was created. Some of the answers we heard in the chat were you potentially use Google Docs or wikis. Was there a specific program that was used for that hyperlink chat or hyperlink text?
Mike, I think that's a question for you.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, Steve?
Hi, Mike. So the question was, did you use a specific program to create that hyperlink document?
Right. Okay. I thought that's what it was. Basically, I used Microsoft Word, and then I just posted it up onto a website. I have my own personal website, but you don't even need to do that. The students can just sort of send that in to you as a Word document, and the links will already be built in there. So it's pretty simple to use.
Okay, so here we have a question from someone asking whether there are resources specifically for teaching Shakespeare to English language learners. I don't know who wants to field that, but I think it's a great question.
Jenny, we're actually, I'm having a little trouble. I don't see them coming up, but if you can hear me, we're actually doing a workshop tomorrow with a professor from Pace University in New York to help us out, to give us some pointers on how to do this more effectively.
Great. That sounds terrific. So I see a couple other questions. One question was whether I could review how to save the handouts or the slides. So all you have to do is on the top menu bar where you see all those icons, all the way to the left there's a save icon. If you click on that, it'll give you an option of saving the chat conversation and or the whiteboard, and you can click on the one you want, and then it'll pull up a save window and let you choose the format that you want to save in. You can save it as a PDF or a couple of different file types. So that's the easy way to save it. There was also a question about archiving. This entire recording of tonight's event will be archived in 3 places actually. Well, actually 2 places. So one place is on the PBS Teachers site, and the other is on Classroom 2.0. And I believe it'll also be archived on the Folger Library site. And we'll post 4 different types of files. So one will be a recording of the whole event, so you'll see it as though you were here in the Illuminate participating. The second will be a transcript of the chat. The third will be an audio-only recording, and the fourth will be a portable video recording that you could download to a handheld device. So you'll have lots of options for revisiting this webinar after tonight, and hope that you will do so and share it with friends and colleagues who couldn't be here. Any other questions before we wrap it up? Okay, I see someone's asked a question. Do you have suggestions for grading these items? I know that's always an interesting challenge for folks who haven't done a lot of multimedia projects before. What are your thoughts on how to assess this type of student work?
If you want to do a traditional grading, you could just have the students write a reaction, a response after the fact, and get an essay. And we as teachers sort of are very comfortable dealing with written work like that. But I think there's other rubrics that you could create to see if the students are doing the kind of things that you'd want them to do.
And if I can jump in here too, I think it's also important to remember what it is that we're specifically targeting. For me, it's never the technology, it's are the kids doing a close reading of Shakespeare's text? And that's what I am looking at in any kind of performance piece, whether it's through a live performance or if it's through some kind of technology like a podcast. Are they looking at the text closely and understanding and analyzing it closely? And the technology is just a tool to get there.
Yeah, can I just chime in? What I also like to do is look at what you expected from the final product, what a good final product would be, and sort of work backwards from there. And that can give some, you kind of value the idea of the audience and the sort of integration of the technical and the literary principles you were trying to get at. I double dare anyone, if you email me, I have rubrics on these things. I will send them to you. It's cshamburg@njcu.edu. And I'll send you a couple of rubrics if you want them.
Another interesting thing you can do if you have this kind of class is to have the students help create the rubric. In other words, discuss what the elements of a good trailer would be, say, for example, for one of my activities, and then sort of discuss what on a scale of 1 to 5, what a 5 would be, a 3 would be, a 1 would be, and when they have created the rubric, they have even more ownership of the activity.
Great. I see that 3 folks have their hands raised. The first one is Bran. Did you want to use your microphone, or did you want to put a question in the chat space? If you could use chat to let me know how you'd like me to call on you, that would be great. Oh, that hand went down. Okay, so 2 other hands are up, Carol Johnson and Sherlyn. Let me know if you have actual questions, and if so, how you would like to pose them to our guests. Since we're already over time, I would recommend that you post them in the chat space.
Hi, Jenny, and this is Steve. I'm putting up the survey link, but one of the moderators must be closing that window to see something on the screen. So just need the moderators to know, please don't close that survey window because that closes it for everybody. So you can move that window aside by dragging it, but let's go ahead and leave it up.
Great, thanks. Okay, so I see Sherlyn wants to ask a question using the mic. So I've given you mic privileges now. You should be able to click on the bottom microphone icon and ask your question.
Thank you. I just had a question about the activity packs that you mentioned, and I'm wondering if there's any way to embed those in a PowerPoint presentation or some other presentation.
There are actually little pieces of code that are designed to be embedded on a website, so you could absolutely grab them and embed them on your site. If you're just looking for images of them, I would recommend doing a screen capture or saving the screen from tonight's event and just plugging that into a PowerPoint presentation. Carol Johnson, did you have a question, and if so, how did you want to address it to our presenters? Well, the hand went away, so I guess I'll take that as a no. And it is 9:36, so I want to thank everyone for being here and sticking around for over an hour and a half. We really appreciate it. And more than anything, I want to thank all of our presenters who did a fabulous job and shared some really terrific teaching tools. I used to be a high school English teacher and taught Shakespeare for years and had no idea about many of these strategies, and would actually love to get back into the classroom and use some of them now. So I hope other folks who are here tonight are equally inspired and that they will follow up with you through the blog, through PBS Teachers Connect, and through the emails that you've shared tonight to learn more about these ideas. And of course, we hope that everyone will tune in and watch Great Performances King Lear later this month. Please visit your local PBS station to find out when they're airing it. Most of them, I think, are airing it the last week of the month. It's a terrific production and certainly well worth sharing with students. So thanks, everybody, and have a terrific night.
Thank you, everybody. This is Mary Ellen. Good night from Boston.
Good night from Washington.
Good night from New York.
Good night from Maplewood, New Jersey.
Good night from the East Village, USA.
Good night from the other Washington, Washington State.